May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our part to preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, Ed Brown, or Edward Brown. He was Ed Brown for a long time, and then he was Edward Brown, but because he wanted to go Edward, but he's back to being Ed again. Anyway, he mentioned that a while back. I think he's happy with either one. This is the third podcast with Ed Brown. He was ordained by Shunryu Suzuki in 1971 and received Dharma Transmission from Mel Weitsman in 1996. So Ed is the founder and teacher of the Peaceful Sea Sangha. That's PeacefulSeaSangha.org. PeacefulSeaSangha.org. He's the author of a number of books, including the Tassajara Bread Book, Tassajara Cooking, No Recipe, Cooking is a Spiritual Practice. And he also edited the book of Suzuki Roshi lectures, Not Always So. He and I have had the same agent who's retired, the highly esteemed Michael Katz, and Michael spoke very highly of the way that Ed edited Not Always So. Also, at times, Michael has said to me, why don't you write something that shows how you felt at that time, like Ed Brown does. And Richard Baker said to me when I was Shuso, Ed Monk at Tassajara, Ed was the one before, he said, Ed gave excellent lectures. And what he was implying was, why don't you give good lectures like Ed Brown? There's a surprise at the end of the podcast. One thing I think is interesting is that, if you listen to the way Ed Brown talks at first here, you'd think he wasn't doing anything, just languishing away. But that's not true at all. He's very active. He's got a spring sitting coming up, and he's doing workshops and stuff. You can look, just go to PeacefulSeaSangha.org and look at, I don't know what it is, events, calendar. And also, if you go to shop, it lists his books. I'd put books-shop. Okay. Anyway, Ed is active and, refusing to retire like some others of us. He's always sort of struggling, but he's thriving at the same time. And, Ed and I were ordained together by Shunryu Suzuki. Ed was senior to me. He came in 65. I came in 66. Ed, then me, then Lou Richmond, then Angie Runyon. And in this podcast, Ed is going to talk about his expulsion from teaching and having workshops or anything at the San Francisco Zen Center, mainly Green Gulch Farm. That's where he always did it. And he's going to talk about his prostate cancer. Well, very interesting stuff there. A few other things. He talks about the his situation with the Zen Center early on, and he talks about it later on. It revolves around a letter that was sent to Zen Center complaining about some things he said in a lecture, and Zen Center got hold of him about that and wanted to talk about it, and he wrote back angry emails saying, I don't know what he sent back to them. But then he received you are banned email. And he talks about that, how it affected him and this and that. And he talks about the recent effort to get him reinstated, which he was not an instigator of it at all. And so we go into that. Now, there's a few things in here. AAG is mentioned, but some might not know that is one of the two head monasteries of the Soto sect in Japan, and Shunryu Suzuki was a Soto Zen teacher. We mention Hoitsu. Hoitsu Suzuki is Shunryu Suzuki's son and Dharma heir. Rinso-in is mentioned. That's the temple of Suzuki, the Suzuki Hoitsu and Shunryu in Japan. Oh, I wanted to explain one thing. Ed talks about, here's another thing he talks about. He talks about his book deals. But this comes up here. The person wanted to know what was the meaning of 10% of retail in a contract between the author and the publisher. In other words, he got 10% of retail on the Tassajara Bread Book, a very good percentage. Because the sales, the retail sales fluctuate, but actually 10% of retail means the retail price posted on the book. And anyway, we talk about that. I just wanted to explain that. He talks about Deborah Madison and an event at Greens and Annie Somerville, and he talks about how Deborah was ignored. And listen, nothing here I say is to criticize Annie. She had nothing to do with that. Annie's wonderful, and she's done a great job at Greens. But we don't say that there. Anyway, we mentioned a film. He mentions Tano Maeda, and I, was head of the Buddhist International Film Festival, and I talk about a film, and that film is Tassajara, A Meditative Portrait by Fraser Bradshaw, and it is on shunryusuzuki.com in the film video section. When I ask him about the cookbook, that's why I made the call to begin with, is just about asking him about some things about the cookbook. I asked him how it came about, but I was just talking about at Tassajara. How did it come about once he was in the kitchen at Tassajara? There's a whole long story about how it came to that point, but that's in another podcast of ours, and it'll certainly be in Tassajara Stories. So, anyway, at the end of this podcast, I'm going to play what he said, audio from his lecture that led to his banishment. It's very brief, two brief snippets. The two places that the letter referred to, the letter of complaint, the two places in his lecture that disturbed them. So I'm playing that at the end of this podcast. I'd say to those who decided on Ed's banishment. I'm sorry, I can't think of another word right now. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. So that's it. Thank you. And here we go. Let's give Ed Brown a call just as soon as we've had our pause to meditate. So when you hear the bell, if you're of such a mind, hit pause and meditate or whatever for as long as you want. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause, and we'll be here to hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever, and we'll give Ed Brown a call.
Hello?
Hi, Ed.
How you doing?
All right, how are you?
Okay, nice to hear your voice.
Yeah. How are you doing? What's happening?
Oh, not much. I've gotten, you keep living and you get older.
I've noticed that, yeah.
So, we're not the young whippersnappers, or we used to be. I just don't, especially I don't have much energy for doing things.
Mm-hmm.
I do a little bit. I've ended up having a morning sitting group that's, just online for the most part.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice. It just sort of happened, and from various circumstances, and occasionally somebody new shows up. It's kind of mostly been the same people for a couple of years now, but recently 2 or 3 new people have come on. At times I think, oh well, I was going to start a Zen center and blah, blah, blah. And on the other hand, I don't know about having a Zen center.
Yeah. A lot of trouble.
Yeah.
You've had a group that's continued.
I had 2 once-a-week sitting groups, and they both fell apart for different reasons. Mea culpa, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anymore. I used to think it would be good to write and, share my story or whatever, and write something. And I haven't done any writing for a year and a half or 2 years or something. And
yeah,
I don't know what it makes. No, I don't know that it's so important. Or, it's, as soon as you think about it in worldly terms, or the conditioned world or whatever, it's like a big deal. So it's more like you're going to write something. Who's going to read it? And, who cares? And, but so you really need to, if you're going to write something, it's just an offering to the everything. And some people may read it and some people may not.
Yeah.
Do you know Mitsue?
Mitsue.
Mitsue. She's a photographer, and she's a Japanese woman, and she was good friends with Kaz, and she's married now to a German man, a Bernd. They live in Japan, and did you know I went to Japan?
Yeah, I did. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew you went. What was that about? One
of my students said, I want to take you to Japan. So I said, well, what for?
Uh-huh.
And I decided I would go to Japan just to see what Japan's like, and not because I have any particular, I did want to go pay my respects to Dogen at Eiheiji,
mm-hmm.
and they wouldn't let us into the Founders Hall. They wouldn't let us see the statue of him. I wasn't particularly persistent, Excuse me, young man, I've been practicing Zen for more, 3 times as many years as you've been alive. Maybe you could, do me the honor of letting me pay my respects to the gentleman.
Well, I think the way to do that would have been to go through Hoitsu.
Well, I saw Hoitsu, and I didn't. I guess we saw Hoitsu before that, and he said, I'll let some people at AH, you're coming. but I didn't say. And would you be sure to let them know that I would like to see Dogen and pay my respects to Dogen? So I wasn't specific enough about asking him anything in particular. But we had a great time seeing him at Rinso Inn.
Yeah.
And meeting his son, Shingo, and their families. And it was really quite lovely, you know. At dinner time, I think they'd gotten, you know, they had some food that they'd made there, and then they also had some sushi that they got someplace. But anyway, Hoitsu and I were sitting at the head. I think that, you know, at the very head of the table, I think they had a photo or something of Suzuki Roshi. So he was sitting at one end at the end of the side, and I was sitting opposite him. And he, at the beginning of the meal, I think we did a meal chant of some kind, and then he had
really. You did a meal chant with him at Rinso Inn?
I don't remember. I don't
ever remember doing that.
We may have just bowed.
Yeah.
I think, you know, you're probably right. We just bowed.
Itadakimasu.
Itadakimasu, and he had a 1.5 liter. You know, he had a giant bottle of sake.
Yeah.
And he popped it open and then poured everybody water glasses of sake.
Yeah. Yeah, he was disappointed when I was there. Oh, God, 9 years ago. 10 years ago.
You'd stop drinking.
Oh, yeah, I didn't drink anymore. And it was like he couldn't. It was hard for him to comprehend it. I was always the biggest drinker there, you know.
Yeah, one of my students who was on the trip is not drinking. He's been sober for 16 years or something. He's not about to start.
Yeah.
And he didn't mind that. It's all very curious. I don't know what to make of the whole thing, but you know, I am enjoying having a morning group, and we sit quietly for 15 minutes, and we call it free writing, and I write down, make a few notes, and then because then at 7:15 I give a 15-minute talk before but sitting, and then I usually recite a poem at the end of the sitting. Sometimes I read something from Suzuki Roshi or Dogen or somebody. And then we have a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes of visiting. People, you know, I ask not if you have any. It's interesting, you know, because I don't just ask for questions, because questions implies like, you know, I've been giving you some information. Now, do you have any questions about the information I've been giving you? And it's not about information, you know. So I say, so if you have any questions, comments, reflections, observations, you're invited to share with everybody, which seems more in keeping with, you know, what we're up to.
Yeah.
It's not like, and Suzuki Roshi, I don't know if you were there that morning at, was it Tassajara? Was it, you know, and then, and finally, you know, got figured out, you know, like the morning of the 5th day of Sesshin, he would often give say a few words during Zazen.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you think I have things to tell you that you don't know. That's a mistake. You think I can explain things that you don't understand. That's wrong thinking. And he went on about how sometimes the teacher is the student, and sometimes the student is the teacher, and the teacher bows to the student bows to the teacher, and so. And then, oh no, it wasn't Tassajara. You know, it was at the city center.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but that didn't mean anything.
It must have been a Sesshin, you know, when I was every so often I was up, mostly I was at Tassajara from when we went back in 67 and through 1973, but there was a few months here and there where I was I lived in Berkeley at one point, taking care of the Berkeley Zen Center while Mel was at Tassajara. And it was during one of those times I did a session at the city center. Or it was after. No, it wouldn't have been after I left Tassajara because Suzuki Roshi wasn't alive then, but it was at the city center because I remember, because then he leapt up and everybody's sitting facing the wall, and he had his little stick and he hit everybody, in the room, went around.
Rensaku.
What's it called?
Rensaku.
Rensaku.
Yeah, that's when the teacher goes around and hits everybody with their their noi or whatever it's called, right?
Yeah. For the first few people, he was saying, "Who is the teacher? Bam, bam. Who is the student? Bam, bam."
Oh, that's
and
great.
After and then after 4 or 5 people, he ran out of breath and just went around the remaining people. And big session, people were all the way out down the hall, and the zendo's full, and so 70 people or more, something anyway.
Yeah.
But that was really lovely, and those talks he gave like that have really stayed with me somehow, and so occasionally, but that kind of spirit, I thought, well, if I'm the teacher, we're in trouble. But it turns out, that I'm in his vein of, I'm not the teacher who's going to give you information that you don't have, or things that I'm not going to tell you things that you don't know.
Yeah.
We're studying together, so see what you notice, see what you find out. So that's been nice. And Margot and I are doing okay. We're doing better these days. That's nice.
Well, that's good. Any couple that can stay together is I respect. Because we could have been together 20 years.
Oh my goodness! How about that?
And this is also my 20th year not to drink.
Oh my goodness! Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
Oh, because I was thinking more like that you stopped in 2014, but it's more like 2004.
2014, I was already living here.
Yeah. So you were, so it's more like 20 years. Wow. Well, congratulations on that, too.
This is the 20th year. It won't be 20 years.
until you get through this year.
Yeah, December 31st at 11:30 p.m.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh.
So anyway, recently, one of my students, he corresponded with you some, and he somehow got this idea. He said, "I want to get you reinstated. That's a travesty. That's an injustice. What do you think about that?" And I said, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to think of it. I don't know that. I don't know what might be possible or not, and I seem to be doing okay. And I said, but you can do what you want to do. And so he worked very hard on it, and he got you and other, Tia Strozer and Vicky Austin and Norman Fisher and a whole list of people to send in letters and to the Zen Center, and they had a meeting. I don't know, it's been a couple of weeks now. And, of course, they didn't tell me anything about it. But basically, it was much in line with the original message of, that I was no longer invited to teach or give talks. I'm an extraordinary person, in some ways the epitome of the person most representative of Zen Center, or something like this. And but you've said some things that were upsetting to people, and we don't trust you not to do that again.
Yeah, well, that's true. What's true is that it upset people. I said, hey, you can't make any deal that he won't do that again. Look what he said that upset people. It was nothing. And I sent the audio and the transcript of both your offending statements to a few of us who were communicating about this. And when Vicki Austin read it and listened to it, she was really upset. She said, well, this isn't at all what they were saying.
Well, by the way, I do think, they were more upset with my email exchange with them than with the actual circumstances. And that confused the whole situation because in my emails, I was very upset.
Yeah, you're insubordinate. You're off-brand, is what Peter Coyote said. You've gotten off-brand.
There's this word, or this understanding that people have, which is not based on anything. Do you know that someone, after Patricia had gone her way, and I was, single for, 3 or 4 years, and I was down at Tassajara, and I took a liking to a woman who was a student at the city center, and I asked her about if we could have a date when we were back in town together, and she said, oh, I could never date you. And I said, really? She said, oh, no, you're a womanizer. And it's like, excuse me? And, maybe I didn't ask the right questions, but I said, how do you know that? I mean, because, maybe I should ask, what's a womanizer? Can we look at this? Because then she said, well, everybody at Zen Center knows you're a womanizer. I have no idea what that's about because how do you know what is a womanizer? Because I'm compared to so many people. I've been in monogamous relationships, so I don't know where all that comes from, but everybody knows it. And apparently everybody knows that I've hurt and harmed people with what I've said. Only we can't tell you what those things were, but you did.
Yeah.
It's all interesting because I don't know, as I've thought about it, I mean, the Zen Center that I knew and loved and that spent so many years being part of, there's no such thing anymore.
No, it's very different. Somebody I did a podcast with pointed that out in a neat way. They said, through the years, the culture and the social rules and everything of Zen Center have continually evolved and changed. So it's gone through these various periods that are very different from each other.
By the way, are you keeping up with Alan? With what's been happening with Al?
Oh, sure. I read his Caring Bridge page every day.
It's amazing, how I was just so lucid and clear, and apparently there's still a lot of physical.
Yeah. Well, he's come back. He's come back.
He seems to be very
right.
Visibly so, because from there, he wasn't even opening his eyes. And
oh yeah,
and he started opening his eyes, and it's been an amazing progression of events since then over the last month or 6 weeks.
Right. It's been because at first it looked like he'd just be that was it. He'd just be in a coma and die. But he's communicating quite well, and that's wonderful.
Oh, now he's communicating quite well.
Yeah.
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 pretty sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got a great support, a lot of support. That's wonderful.
Yeah, a lot of support. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a podcast with him not that long before that happened. You know, few months before, and that was great. I mean, really, I love doing that, man. People it doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter how unimportant they, I have so many people say, well, I wasn't anybody. Nobody needs, I don't have anything to say. Everybody has a story, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it makes,
yeah. But so, by the way, you could really, today, as I mentioned in passing in my email, I found out that Sandy Hollister had died in April of 2000, or whatever it was, 2021.
Right.
And I didn't know. She and I, she introduced me to this, medical device called the Beamer, which generates an electrical field which causes your body to release nitrous oxide, and it improves your circulation.
Huh.
And I became a distributor because she introduced me to this, and that also involved Tim Buckley because I ran into her at it was a mountain seat ceremony, and that was before the ceremony over 308, 310, and we got to talk, and she said, "Oh, Tim Buckley, I really love the Beamer." So I said, "What's that?" And so I now have one or two of them here at the house, and I've been selling them for a while. It's but anyway, I was trying to find out if she was still around because she was my upstream person, and the person I would call on for help.
Oh, yeah.
And so I couldn't find her, and so that was good to find there. And so, but and I read through that interview, which she transcribed, and and telling her story, you got lovely animation in your voice, and in the real feel for the story, and it's how much you could get from your reading of that, how much you appreciate someone's story. And as you say, it's not like it's a remarkable or special story or something, but it's her story, and sure enough, it was. And then it makes a difference when somebody values it, of course, like you're doing. So that's great. Thank you. I appreciate your.
Well, thank you. I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
You were in the kitchen like at first, and then you were in the garden. You came back to the kitchen, but then you were working. No. Oh, you never went back?
No. No, I don't recall ever going back.
Okay.
It was the fall of '69. Angie took over as a Tenzo, and I was down in the garden, and I was also working that fall on the Tassajara Bread Book.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about, was how that came about.
When I was a cook, and obviously there was, we would have at that time we had about 40 guests, or 40 or 50 guests, and we had 40 or 50 students, and eventually there was 70 guests and 70 students for a while there, and now who knows what's going to happen, and there's even talk of Zen Center selling Tassajara. We can't afford it. And,
no, I don't think that'll happen.
Well, I hope not.
Yeah, well, they don't have a guest season. But, all right, so you were in the kitchen.
But anyway, when I was in the kitchen, guests would, we were selling the bread in the office. And then people would say, "Do you have a recipe for making the bread?" And I said, "No, I don't have a recipe. If you want to learn, come in the kitchen tomorrow morning at 5.
Yeah.
So I had, numerous occasions that one or two people would come in. And then, because I was the Tenzo, the head guest cook, the head the head of the Zenda Cooking, the baker, you know, I was doing what nowadays is 4 or 5 jobs. And of course, there's twice as many people. So, but we were way understaffed and not knowing any better and just working hard to make up for it. But so that's how, you know, Jimmy and Ray taught me, because it meant they had less work to do. So if they came in and made the bread, then I could be busy doing other things. And so I would have them mix up the sponge and then have it rise for a while. They'd go have some coffee. They'd come back. I'd teach them how to knead and mix in the rest of the flour and all the rest of that. So that's where so then I wrote down and pictured, you know, and eventually Frances Thompson, of course, was involved with picturing and actually she did the drawings of the hands. And we had, but I had a lot of confidence in writing down the instructions because I'd been giving them verbally to people for, you know, a number of months there and 1 or 2 guest seasons. And so that fall I worked on writing things down, and we had also kept, in anticipation of having a book, there was at least one practice period where we wrote down, I had people working in the kitchen write down every recipe that we did, and especially for baked things. So eventually I was putting it together, and then it came out first in a kind of Xerox format. I don't know if I have any of those around. There was about 50 copies with I think it was a yellow cover, and I forget what it was called.
I forgot.
And
I would really like to see that.
Yeah, so I don't think I have one anymore. I might. It's one of so many things, but you know, I did clear out one room in my house to make a guest room. One room in my house that was full of clutter, and now the clutter is in one room and not 2.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, we did that book, and then you know, at some point, you may have heard, you know, that Dick said that Lawrence Ferlinghetti, you know, is interested in publishing the bread book. And I went to see him, and at you know, up above City Lights, and he said, "Oh yeah, you know." I said, "Are you going to typeset?" He said, "No, we're just because the book I had, it didn't even have the writings would go sometimes over into the margins." I said, "Are you going to typeset?" He said, "Oh no, we'll just copy this. It's just going to go out to the kids in the commune." And he just did not have the idea that later, you know, Sam Burkholz came up with it, Shambhala.
Right. So,
I mean, and
yeah, go on.
So anyway, he didn't pull out a contract or anything, and I said, you know, I kind of nodded, but I wasn't real interested. You know, he wasn't valuing it. You know, it was just it was just a thing that you could, you know, we don't need to typeset it. We just take this and print it up and send it out. And so, and when I saw, then I forget the timing, but I saw, you know, in the basement of the Shambhala book in Berkeley, it's way before Shambhala had, you know, then Shambhala eventually, the publishers eventually moved to Boulder. But they started out in the basement of the Shambhala bookstore, and I took it down and showed it to Sam, and he looked at it for, you know, maybe 3 minutes, and he said, "This is amazing. This is great." I'll give you $100 and 10% royalties.
$100.
And then he, yeah, it was $100, but that was more than Lawrence Ferlinghetti offered, and 10% royalties.
That's really good.
It's really good because it's almost unheard of in paperback books.
Yeah, that's great.
And they're still trying to get me off of that. They were this last year they offered me. They said, we want you to revise the bread book, and the contract for revising the bread book, I get. The royalties are based on their income, not this price of the book, and it comes out to it comes out to hundreds of dollars less for my part and any sales of the book. So
wait a minute, hundreds of dollars doesn't mean anything. How much per book? Well, what percentage difference?
Well, it was, instead of 10%, it was more like 8% or 9%, or But you're talking about two different things, because instead of 10% of the retail price, it's some percentage of the net money received. But they agreed with me that I would be receiving less money.
Yeah, I think it would be a bigger jump than 10 to 9. I bet it would be like from 10 to 6 or something.
Well,
but I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either. It might have been 10 to 8, but in those same terms. But anyway, I don't know if you heard, but I last year my PSA counts went up, and I went in for a prostate biopsy, and I was diagnosed with having prostate cancer.
Oh, no, I did not know.
Oh, yeah. So, my urologist was kind of funny, because they don't post those results online. Your PSA count, okay, you can see that online. But, then it turns out there's more than one PSA count, and the PSA count that he orders, you can't see online for at least a month. But you can call him and find out the results from him. So there's two different PSA counts, which I still haven't figured out.
That's weird.
But one is the one that your regular physician uses, and one is the one that the urologists use, which is, they say, more indicative of the level of cancer. So so they said you can. He was kind of funny though, he said, well, the good news is you don't have the worst kind of cancer. The bad news is you don't have the best kind of cancer. The bad news is you don't have the worst, or the good news is that you don't have anyway, I had the intermediate cancer, the better kind of intermediate cancer.
Mm-hmm.
On the scale of whatever, up to 14 or something, I can't remember all these things. And so I met one of my students back in Massachusetts connected me with a friend of hers who got rid of his prostate cancer over the course of a year and a half through exercise, diet, and supplements. So, and then he sent me, and not everybody believes in this, and even my acupuncturist said, oh yeah, well, why don't you, and the urologist says, well, let's get you can get started with radiation whenever you want here. And he also at one point said, I am steering you toward radiation, but I just don't, if I can do something without radiation, the radiation is like, it's 45-minute drive in each direction, 5 days a week for 4 weeks. That means that's a month of my life. I'm not going to do anything else besides drive there and back and get radiated and maybe go for the, and so it's not my idea of how to improve my health.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working actually on improving my health, and now I feel better. than I have in some time. Energetically, I feel quite good. And interestingly enough, one of the supplements is something called modified citrus pectin. And modified citrus pectin shifts your body from sympathetic nervous system to parasympathetic. So your body shifts out of survival mode into rest and digest and, meditate mode. It's very interesting. And I got a book. My acupuncturist said, well, you should see my friend Isaac Elias up in Santa Rosa. And Isaac Elias' book for the next 20 years. You can't see him. I mean, I don't know. But his book starts out talking about this and how a woman is in his office saying, and she's like, I've just been diagnosed with this or that. And I don't want to die. I'm going to beat this. I'm going to beat it. I'm going to win. I'm going to fight with everything I have. And he said, eventually he gets around to saying, that attitude, and it's the attitude of our culture, that if you have cancer, you should fight it. You should fight. And I don't believe in fighting. And I don't believe in trying to radiate the cancer. And meantime, radiating some perfectly good parts of my body, if it's not necessary. So I'm thinking if I'm more healthy, then my body will do what my body knows how to do, which is get rid of the cancer. So the modified citrus pectin shifts you from this, I'm going to fight it, I'm going to beat it. And he tells the woman, and it's part of the idea of his book, it's called the survival paradox. He says that when you go into survival mode, your body creates a lot of stress hormones that are not good for your survival.
That's interesting. Wow.
So, there you are in Bali, and I would guess, you don't need to go into survival mode so much. So, should be good for your health, my friend. It's very interesting. And then this man in Massachusetts, who I talked to once or twice, and he sends me stuff by email, and I haven't been in touch with him for some time, but he also sent me something called the Protect Study. It's with a capital T on the end, and it's now part of and he says, Ed, you can look this up, but this is now part of the official protocol of the American Urological Association, which means my urologist ought to know about it, but my urologist is not telling me about it because the study showed they took large numbers of men who did in 3 groups who had prostate removal, radiation, or what what I'm doing is called active surveillance. But and after 15 years, they have basically the same results in terms of life expectancy and metastasis. There's 3 groups. The groups that did active surveillance, which includes people doing nothing and people doing, like me, diet, exercise, supplements. And then there's people doing radiation, and there's people who had their prostate removed.
Yeah.
And after 15 years, they have about the same results as each other.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting.
Of the 3 groups. So, and I haven't, looked it up. I'm taking his word for it, but it's now part of the official protocols. It's in there. And he sent me, here's where you can look it up. And so I'm taking his word for it, but, seems he's a Zen person. I don't think he's a priest. He may be have a lay, but he does have a lay name. So he had, if he's a priest, he's not busy being a priest anymore. He's busy writing about prostate cancer. And so anyway, and the detox diet, I occasionally have, but the detox diet is kind of amazingly enough, vegan. I'm eating a lot more miso soup and rice, and it's no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wheat, no corn. So I'm eating rice, white rice, brown rice with wild rice, and I'm eating more miso, and I'm back to eating musso.
Oh,
you
yeah.
Ever musso,
Oh, yeah.
sesame butter with red miso.
I make musso now.
Yeah, that's what I do. I get sesame butter and
I love it.
red miso. Yeah, no, it's great.
We make gamasio.
Yeah, I'm making gamasio again.
Actually, our housekeeper does everything, but we teach her. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, wonderful. So, anyway, so far my, to really know something, I'll probably sometime next year or later this year have another biopsy. In the meantime, my counts with my regular count has gone down. The count that he likes and is interested in, my urologist, has stayed the same. So whatever these things mean. So it's a little, but I feel good, and I'm learning things about how, and part of my way you can't tell much about your prostate. I can, but I was also having, I had they stopped giving you the PSA test when you're 70. 70 is the designated age by somebody, but Kaiser here says, well, we give them to you until 74.
What?
So
I'm still getting them, and I'm 79.
Well, then you're in a different part of the world or something. Because
wait a minute.
Officially,
I'm just getting the test. Is that what you're talking about?
PSA.
Why would they stop?
Well, they stop because it doesn't matter after the age of 74 to get prostate cancer or something. I don't know.
Oh,
but
hey, listen, Bill Winter, Dr. Winter, died of prostate cancer like when he was 80 or he was maybe over 80. And he said...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he said, God damn it, he said, I didn't follow my own advice. I spoke at his memorial in Monterey. He said he didn't follow his own advice, but he was like, I'm not sure what age, but like around 80 or something.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll see. If the counts go back up, I'm willing to entertain getting radiation. I don't really want to have prostate removal.
This is very interesting. You should write this. This is very interesting, and you're interested in talking about it. So why don't you write it down? I'd like to have it. I think it's very interesting what you said, and what you said about how the three types of responses to it have pretty much the same results.
Well, I would need to look up more specifically, but my recollection was the same results in terms of life expectancy and metastasis. Yeah.
That reminds me, that neurologist, therapist in Zurich. He told me he's full of stuff like that. He said people, from airplane accidents and where they have like this whole group of traumatized people, that people that get trauma therapy or that have the trauma experts come deal with them, they recover slower than the people who don't. The people who don't do better. That's sort of like R.D. Lang. Remember R.D. Lang?
Yeah, R.D. Lang is great.
Yeah,
he was saying that.
That sort of thing he said.
But it's like there's something to be said for all of this, and that at some point you can get. Alan Osanaki is very lucky,
Yeah.
And partly he's lucky because I may have had something to do with it, David. I went over and I did my hands-on healing with him for about 45 minutes, and he showed up.
That's very interesting.
He wasn't there, and I'm not, but he came. There he was in his heart finally, and there was an awesome feeling in the room. Costa Hashi was there, and everybody who came in at that time was there was such an awesome feeling, and I think it's because, in retrospect, I think it's because he was right on the edge of living and dying. Where everything is sacred. It's like birth and death, and you're right there with the sacred on the edge. And it was an amazing. I went twice like that, but the first time especially was just stunning. And Laurie said, Laurie was there. I've known Laurie since we were together at Tassajara years ago. So, but anyway, that was quite remarkable. And then but he has these students in Germany who are doctors, and they were feeding advice to Laurie and the kids, Alex especially, and Sylvie's gone back to Chicago now. But the doctors were saying, well, here's what we do in Germany, and here's what we do, and they would tell the Kaiser doctors what they wanted. But for a while, it seemed like, oh my goodness, he's in this. They're going to keep him alive, in a coma, indefinitely here. Oh my God, now what?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I was around a situation like that with Graham Pesci's son, who had
he had an automobile accident or something.
Oh,
right?
It was terrible, and he was supposed to die. I sat with him like the next day, and for the longest time. And here's what I saw: doctors, worst case; nurses much more optimistic, saying, well, we've seen a lot of them come back when they're this bad or something. But anyway, I just sat there with Mark. I knew Mark. I sat with a long time, just, sort of sending him messages, that sort of thing. Lou Richmond said when he was in a coma, it really pissed him off.
I know.
When people didn't know that he could hear them and stuff. But also he talks about that Yvonne sent in a Rinpoche. That's right. Right.
And he said, and he talked about it at Yvonne's memorial, which was postponed about a year because of COVID. Finally, it was at the Tiburon Church, and he said, yes, Yvonne was really, and Yvonne's daughter,
Hillary?
Hillary, yeah. Hillary was so articulate about her mom. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And she took in, wounded cats and dogs and Brian, dead squirrels. And
yeah.
And how it was both, horrifying and touching. But Yvonne brought in a Tibetan Rinpoche or Lama that she knew, and he said later, he told Lou, he said, "You were gone. Your Lao was nowhere. I couldn't find it for the longest time, and then I coaxed it back, or whatever it was for. The Lao was the life force, or the innermost in energy or whatever, your spirit, your soul, whatever his.
Yeah.
His,
Yeah.
And Lou says at this point, and I would feel the same way, like what happened with Alan. Like, he said he could be right. But he's very grateful to Yvonne, and when he says he could be right, he's like, it's a little bit more towards he's probably right. It was not coming for the longest time. I mean, that was 12,
I remember.
12 days or so.
I remember he didn't have a gag response.
Yeah.
He was. We thought he was going to die in the next 15 minutes.
Oh my.
Yeah, I remember sitting around waiting, and I've seen people come back. I've seen people do very well. Now, you were saying, you started this off by saying in defense of medicine. Oh yeah, listen, I know that, man. Best hospital in Bali is 20-minute walk from here. And I've gone there many times, and it's great. It's wonderful. It's very modern. The doctor, it's like Kaiser. They got everything. I'd like to go back to the bread book. I have a couple of questions.
Oh, okay.
You were, in the first place, you were Tenzo in 67 and 68. Do you remember until when?
Well, it was through the summer of 69.
Through the summer of 69. All right, that's all I need to know. And when did you start? When did you put together this little bread book you all did there?
Well, that's what I think. I was kind of collecting recipes while I was still Tenzo, and then that fall I put some of them. That's when I think I put together that little book.
In the fall of 69?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I was also doing, I was working in the garden, and then I would, and then, I would say the garden, but actually it wasn't gardening, it was really early on there, and I was digging up the whole garden little by little and getting the rocks out.
But you were like head of the crew, right? Because I can remember you having an altar there and people bowing in.
Well, that's possible. I mean, but
what? You don't remember that? I can.
But often I was the only. I mean, early on, I was.
You were the only one. That's lower garden. You were working in the lower garden.
Lower garden, yeah.
And you did the stone wall in back. Well, you got it started, and I think Jeff Sherman finished it.
Then Jeff Sherman finished it. I started working on the walls there, and that was nice because then Suzuki Roshi decided to have me work with him on stones. So we worked on the, and I think Alan Marlowe and I and maybe a third person.
Mel?
No, I don't think it was Mel. We worked on the. I know Mark Alexander and I worked on the foundation of the Kaisando, which was going to be maybe his new house his new house. But
that was 71, probably, huh?
That was later, yeah.
I mean, but before he died in 71, right?
Yeah. And we were starting, but he still lived in the cabin. I think when we were working on the
right
the stone.
He never moved out of it.
Yeah, out on the creek, and we were using big rocks, and we had a tripod, and it was, and then we worked on the steps from the garden down to the creek. There was two sets of steps. One more like for because he liked the area down those steps. Halfway through the garden, you go down the steps there, and then you're in a kind of there's a kind of area of the side there that's higher, and it goes out to a tree. And he liked to go down there and go out there and then stand out there and watch the stream one way or another.
From the garden you did
anyway,
down to the little creek that would dry up, Cabarga Creek.
Yeah.
Huh. Now, when you were working on the bread book, was that ever was that official? I mean, at some point, early on, did you talk to anybody else?
It was official. It was official in '69. It was part of my work, and people said, "Okay, well, you can do that part time." And I forget, but it was maybe one day a week or one day out of every 5 days. I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't my main. And then I was also doing town trips.
Oh, really? Goodness, you're a busy guy.
Yeah, that.
Well, you were the town tripper. Well, anything you did around the book with Dick would be before he left in October of '68. But
Dick wasn't involved with the bread book, no.
But you said he sent you to Ferlinghetti. Oh, did I misunderstand?
Well, yeah. Well, at some point, I don't know if he was around, but I was supposed to go meet Ferlinghetti. I don't remember, but that was '69 or '70. Oh,
I see. Well, wait a minute. Your book came out in '70, so
yeah. So they did a very quick turnaround but in '69 was when I was first putting together this little Xerox book.
Yeah.
I don't know that I had before then. That's my recollection anyway, and then once we had that, as I said, Ferlinghetti looked at it and I can remember a lot of the times the lines just went out and they didn't. I said, "Well, are you gonna typeset it?" Nah.
That's funny. That's why he didn't see the potential, and Sam did.
No, and Sam did.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, David, but I mean, it was a huge seller. But I know personally. I mean, all kinds of people started. I mean, I know. Do you know Carrie Smith?
No.
Did you meet Carrie Smith? Because Carrie, it turns out, and when we started our Tassajara Bread Bakery in the city, it wasn't going so well. And then 3 people from Bloomington, Indiana came out: Swami Chaitananda, Carrie Smith, and Gaetano Mayeno.
Yeah, right.
And they worked in the bakery one day. They sat down and made plans a day, and they presented us to the plans the third day, and the bakery took off after that. And it turned out, that Carrie Smith had got my bread book in 1970 and started making bread at home and selling out of the door, out of the back of his Woody station wagon in the neighborhoods of Bloomington, Indiana.
Are you saying Bloomington?
Yeah, Bloomington, Indiana.
Far out. Yeah.
Harry Smith got my book, and then after a few more months, he got together with some friends, and they thought they'd start a bakery, and they were making these big batches of bread by hand still. And then he said some old German or Swiss baker came in and thought it was really funny what they were doing. And he said, "Well, come and work with us." So he did, and within a couple of years, they had this huge bakery and 6 retail stores in Bloomington.
Oh, really?
That's
6 retail stores in Bloomington. What's the population there? Good Lord.
Well, there's the University of, there's Indiana.
Yeah. There's Shohaku's there.
No,
now.
Wasn't that.
That's interesting. Tano has talked to me about that, but I didn't know the other people involved.
Now still, he's been for years now the head of the Buddhist Film Festival or something that he created.
Look, I just got a new Tassajara film because of him. He asked me why we didn't have the film that he said they had in the film festival in like 2003 or something. this guy made in 98 at Tassajara. So I got hold of, I didn't even know about it. I got hold of the guy. He said, well, I don't even have digital copies. He said, I've forgotten about that. And he ended up digitizing it, paying for it himself from the super beta, the professional one, and sent it to me, and he put it on his site. And he's done a lot of films since then. He's done feature films. And now it's on Cuke.com it's on Shunryu Suzuki, ShunyuSuzuki.com in the film video section. And it's good, man. It's really good because it's got no dialogue and it's just showing people practicing. And it's very meditative.
ShunyuSuzuki.com?
ShunyuSuzuki.com. That's the archive. That's got all the film.
And there's a video.
It's got 10 zillion photographs. It's got all the transcripts, all the audio. It's got every edited version of the lectures we could find, and we're always working on it when we have light edits of the verbatim versions. All of them, we have light edits of them, and we're always working on it.
That's wonderful. Real treasure, David. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, you could thank Peter Ford and Wendy Persig. Done, it's people working with me, and really that Peter Ford's taken over.
Is Wendy Persig? Is that Chris Persig's mom?
No, his stepmom.
One thing I want to say about that, by the way, is that I was really devastated to get that email from the Zen Center, the Abbot Council people, and since then, as I think back about it, it was a lot like a Kyosaku. And I don't know about you, but when Suzuki Roshi hit me, reality, everything just disappeared. And I would think, wasn't there, after a bit, I think, wait a minute, wasn't there reality, something happening here?
That's great.
And then slowly, oh yes, here we are, there's a room here.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
And this thing with Zen Center was sort of like that, where it was really shattered.
Which email? The one years ago or the one recently?
No, 5 years ago. They know I didn't get anything from the recent. Anyway, what I was going to tell you, my reality just was gone. The huge piece of my life was the Zen Center, and my life with the Zen Center, and in retrospect, it's a little bit like at some point, whether it's me or it's Dan Welch, and like, well, didn't you learn something?
Right.
Because I had a kind of a funny relationship with Zen Center where, I was thinking it was, I didn't understand that it wasn't my Zen Center anymore. And anyway, you learn these things as you learn them. But anyway, but what I wanted to tell you was that, so I was completely devastated, and then, but it pretty soon, within the next few days, I realized, like, I am Suzuki Roshi's disciple, and nobody is taking that away from me.
Yeah.
And you've been such a big part of that, and I was very fortunate to be able to work on the lectures we put together in the Not So. And because I did others, so I have this great photo of Roshi from the cover of the book up on the altar.
Ed's doing something else there while he talks, and what he said was working on the book Not Always So. And next, he means the portrait of Shunryu Suzuki that Mike Dixon did that is available through Cuke.com. High-quality prints of it. Just go to the donate page, you'll see. Anyway, Ed acquired many of them and gave them away as gifts.
And you sent, and I also have the photos that you made for Mike Dixon.
Oh, yeah.
Those are still wonderful. Those are still wonderful.
Wow.
I gave one to, most recently I gave one to Joan Amaral.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
Wendy Biersig is a student of Joan Amaral.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I know Wendy.
Yeah.
Sometime when I was doing an online group, and I met her online, and we had one or two books on together. Well, she's quite, whatever you say, really a dedicated student of Zen.
Yeah, she is. I want to ask about the Tassajara Bread Book again. What was your deal with Zen Center? Because you say Sam offered you 10%, but my understanding is that Zen Center made money on this book.
Well, I'm in charge of the royalties.
Yeah.
And what happened was I got, $15,000 or $20,000 in royalties. For a while, Meg and I had bought 20 acres up in the, near Gary Snyder's.
Oh, you bought into that. You bought into that land. Yeah.
There was a group of people. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, with Dick and Kriyananda. And I
was in a different one, not with Dick and Kriyananda.
Gary? Not with Gary Snyder.
Well, it was in that area, but it wasn't with them. They were already located there.
Was it have anything to do with Allen Ginsberg or Governor Brown?
I don't recall any, big name people being involved.
Oh, okay. You're just up there. Okay.
This 1970, 71. And so that was $8,000. And then, I had a little bit left over. And then pretty quickly, Dick came along and said, it would really be best, for your practice, Ed, if you gave all the royalties to Zen Center, and you don't become, I don't know what he said, but you don't, you can just go on being a Zen student like everybody else. That would be best for your practice. And I thought, oh, okay. I felt so grateful, and, it's very curious about these books, because the book obviously would never have happened if there wasn't a Tassajara.
Right.
And there weren't all of us practicing together. And it's one of the things that would irritate me from time to time when Dick would say, that he founded Zen Center. And he wouldn't say, with the help of everybody else, we founded, he doesn't do that.
No, he doesn't do that.
So he said, I think that would be the best. And I said, okay. I thought, okay. And I for years I didn't regret it. I thought, that's good. And it, except that, eventually, especially when I left Zen Center, then I started having Shambhala send me, 75% of the royalties or 90% of the royalties. And once I wasn't at the Zen Center anymore. And by then, but originally, back in the 70s, the royalties were $40,000 a year, even though they were 10% on a book that cost $295.
Wow.
But they were selling 25,000 copies a year, at least, if not 40.
Yeah.
There were new editions of 25,000 every year or so.
So what percentage were you giving Zen Center?
Well, Zen Center got all the royalties initially. I mean, once I got, whatever it was, 15 or 18,000, then Zen Center got all the royalties until I left in 1985.
Oh, is that right?
84. Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, that was just your gift. It wasn't a work for hire. It wasn't,
no.
But they had, that's interesting. What about the Greens Cookbook?
Well, that was all worked out. That was negotiated, and I forget, and Michael Katz was involved, and Michael sold it for big bucks, and Zen Center had some percentage, and Deborah and I think Zen Center probably had. Michael had lowered his fee from 15% he was taking 10%, and then I think it was 1/3 to the Zen Center and 2/3 to Deborah and I, and she got me to agree to her getting 70% and me getting 30% of our share.
Yeah. How much work did you put into it compared to her?
About the same.
Is that right? Wow. I didn't know that. All right. Well, that's interesting.
Well, I worked on it. I mean, maybe she worked on somewhat more. I think it would have been, 60-40 would have been, more fair in those terms. But on the other hand, it's really Deborah's genius that made Greens what it is, and makes the Greens Cookbook what it is. You cannot get the credit you deserve. You just can't.
Yeah, it's really a mistake to want it.
But, what happened with Deborah, at one point there was a big event at Green's Restaurant, and they invited Deborah to come, and it was the 25th anniversary of Green's or something like that, or I don't know, maybe it was the 40th anniversary. And Annie Somerville was the chef, still the head chef. And I was at one point, they were letting me say something, and then I started out telling a couple of those stories about my time at Greens. And Steve Tukey told me, "Oh, come on, Ed, that's enough. Stop, And I was going to talk about what a genius Deborah was. And I did not get a chance. And nobody else ever talked about Deborah's genius in starting Green's Restaurant. And the rest of the evening was all about Annie Somerville and how brilliant she was. And there was even a movie about Annie and showing pictures, and her at the farmer's market and Annie this and Annie that. And Deborah had to sit through all of that. She should have been, or should still be, or whatever, honored. And I wrote her an email after that, and I talked to her on the phone, and I said I was going to, and I've written about it in, I may have written about it in Tomato Blessings and Radish Teachings. I may have written about it in my book, No Recipe.
Oh, okay.
It's, and of course, there's a certain irony at some point, that, I sent a letter at one point to Dick saying, I've been feeling Suzuki Roshi's love coming down into my shoulders. And I hope you're feeling something like that in your life, some nourishment, support, well-being. And he wrote back and said, "A feeling of your love and your shoulders is one thing, but you could have said something nicer about me at the Green Scoop book." And I had said something nicer about him, but Deborah took it out. I don't know if I told you, but one time I was in Lucerne with Vanya, and he said, I'd been up at Tassajara, and Vanya said, "Hey, Vigorish is in town this week, and he's doing a seminar, and we could go to the end of it. He's doing a talk at the end, and then we could go out to lunch afterwards. How about it?" And I said, "Fine." And we went in for the talk, and Dick was sitting there. I've never seen this before or since, but he was sitting there, cross-legged with his robes, but his arms were folded across his chest the whole time. But anyway, he gave a talk about food and cooking. And afterwards, we were on the way to the restaurant, and he said, "So Ed, because you were there, I gave a talk about food and cooking. How was that for you?" And I said, "I don't know. I didn't want to say anything about it. I don't, And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I mostly fell asleep through it." And he said, "What? Are you still falling asleep?" And I said, "Afraid so." I said, "Afraid so." And he said, "Oh, me too." that kind of took a big edge off of whatever because it didn't bother me that he was saying, "Oh, you're still falling asleep." And then when I said, "Oh, I'm still falling asleep," and he said, "What? You're still falling asleep?" And I said, and then he said, "Me too." And so I felt, and since then we have those kind of simple conversations. Not any big deal conversations, and the only time I see him, I used to see him occasionally when he was in San Francisco, and Paul Rosenblum lives in the next town over in San Anselmo, and Paul would say, "Hey, you want to come with me to pick up Dick at Page Street and take him over to Greens for this or that or one thing or another?" And I'd say, "Oh, okay." And then I went to dinner one night when he said, "The princess is coming to dinner at my house. You want to join us?" And I said, "Sure." Anyway, I should get going. I need to get to bed.
Hey, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And
likewise. Wonderful to catch up.
Yeah, and I also wanted that information about Tassajara Bread Book because I wanted to include what I'm writing, and I think that's good enough. I've got it.
Well, if you need more, I'll see what I can do. Oh, by the way, one final story. I don't know if you heard, but of course, I left Zen Center at about the same time as Dick did, and Dick left with 3 years' salary, which I recall to be $72,000, $24,000 a year, and a van with $150,000 or worth of goods and books and statues and furniture, and I left Zen Center. I said, can I have some severance pay or whatever you call it? And I got a check for $1,000.
And Dick got what? What did he get?
3 years' salary, $72,000.
Oh, 24 a year. Yeah.
And then a van with and all the van is all was his, but it was all paid for by Zen Center money. That was up and over and above his salary.
A van?
Well, yeah, they packed up a van loaded with books.
But it wasn't Dick's van. It was a moving van, right?
It was a moving van. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I got him some stuff too. I got him the Avedisian that was left behind at Green Gulch. I just said I did it that brief time. You and I were together there when I was temporary director, interim director.
He may still get hold of the Avedisians that were at Greens. I had them for a couple of years out in Inverness, which was fabulous.
But there was that big one there And I said, we should just, but this is when Dick was in Potrero Hill. I said, I'm going to take that thing over to Dick at Potrero Hill. People said, well, Zen Center owns that. And I said, look, Edward Avedissian hates Zen Center. He likes Dick. And you don't want that here. It's bad karma. So I took it over there. It was funny. I took it over there. And I know Isan was living there. That place they had briefly, in Potrero Hill. And there was nobody there. And I had the truck in this giant painting. And there was somebody with me because we, need two people. And I said, there's no building you can't break into. And I got into it on the second floor. I got up on the second floor and got an open window. Came back, opened it, and we hung the fucking painting, and nobody said anything. It was so, no. I said to Tommy, I said, hey, did you happen to notice there was that painting there? He went, oh, yeah. I said, well, we took it and blah, blah, blah. He went, oh, thanks. I wanted some people to go, wow, that is so great.
Yeah. So anyway, so the story I was leading to was to say that, I was living out in Inverness, and one day I got a phone call from Shambhala.
Yeah.
I think it was a phone call, and they said, oh, Ed, we are so sorry. We really apologize for this, but, ever since the bread book came out, we have not been paying you any foreign royalties. And it was $39,674. It was somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000.
Huh. When did you get the call? What year?
Oh, well, that was after I left Zen Center. That was, like 1985. Oh, and they said, where do you want the money sent? I said, to me, send me the money.
And when you left Zen Center, remind me, I think you already said it. You did you keep all the royalties then, or
no?
Yeah.
Then I think initially I said 75% I'll have 75%, and I'll still give Zen Center 25%. But eventually, I just made it. I'm going to receive all the royalties now. Thank you very much. And you've gotten enough. You've gotten more than enough.
Yeah. How much do you think it all added up to, what Zen Center got?
I don't know. Nobody knows anymore. Those old wind bells used to have Zen Center's annual budgets in them, and you could see the bread book was 35. The bread book was 10% of Zen Center's income for a lot of the 70s.
Mm-hmm. 200,000.
Yeah, 250,000, I would guess.
Yeah, that's sort of what I thought. Well, hey, this has been fun. It's been great. I got to get back to work. I also got to stand up and walk for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to bed.
All right.
It's been a delight.
It's been really good. Yeah. No kidding.
Have a great day.
All right. You take care. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
So thanks a lot, Ed Brown. Really appreciate that. I'll tell you one thing. I've spent forever editing this podcast. More than, well, I don't know. This is the 5th year I've done them. I can't even remember spending this much time, at least not in recent years. But Ed and I talked for 2 hours and 20 minutes without any concern about it being a podcast. And we said all sorts of things that are not presentable to a polite audience. No, the stuff, it needed a lot of editing and censoring. I almost entirely leave out my opinion about a lot of things and all sorts of stuff I said. Mainly I cut what I said, but I cut some of what he said that, oh well, that's enough. You get the idea. I cut about an hour out of it, and it was sprinkled all through it. It wasn't like just blocks. So here are the two snippets of his talk that were found offensive. Oh, incidentally, one thing I didn't tell Ed, he said, in this attempt to reinstate him at Zen Center, that a bunch of us sent letters in. I did not send a letter in. There were a few letters, and I know I asked about it, and I was told, no, they didn't want any more letters. So they only got, I don't know, they only got a few letters. And I don't think either 5 years ago, those who decided in the first place to ban him from Zen Center, or this recent group, actually reviewed what he said or listened to it. But if I'd have written a letter, it would have said, I think Ed Brown should be reinstated at Zen Center. Ed Brown should be able to teach and give lectures at Zen Center, but on an unconditional basis. And a lot of what people were talking about was all these conditions. And I would say, based on what? Have you listened to what he said? Well, I know one thing they say is they say, well, this isn't the first time people have complained. My personal attitude toward this is they should welcome letters of complaint and write the people and say, thank you so much for expressing your opinion. We'll pass this on to him. And maybe in the future you should not go to a lecture that this particular person gives. And another thing they could do is if Ed was speaking, they could post with the announcement that he'll be speaking, whatever it is, in and outside of the lecture, warning, this spokesperson, or Edward Brown, might say things that offend you. If you do not want to be offended, better not listen to his lecture. Actually, I have been offended by some of the things Ed said, but I didn't write a letter to Zen Center of complaint. Maybe not offended, just sort of cringed. Zen teachers especially, but, Tibet, Zen, who knows, in the history of Buddhism, how many people who have passed on the Dharma have said very, very offensive things. I mean, how offensive was it when, I don't know, I can't remember who said this, Zen is a shit stick. Oh, that reminds me of the time when Dainin Katagiri, who was an assistant teacher who taught with Shunryu Suzuki, he gave a talk at a high school, I think in Minneapolis, where he went on and told these kids that Zen is toilet paper. I mean, good Lord. I don't think a church should be a place you go to feel safe from hearing things you don't want to hear. A church or a temple, I think that the Zen Center should be open to that. But on the other hand, Zen Center has a right to limit who teaches. But, we're talking about one of the only disciples of Shunryu Suzuki who is around to give lectures. I'm a disciple of Shunryu Suzuki, but listen, I'm more off-brand than Ed, and I wouldn't even want to. I think I like everybody at Zen Center. I'm good terms with everybody. I just think if I was the king of Zen Center, I wouldn't want to curry so much the policies of Zen Center to the most offended persons. or, I can understand they're afraid of getting sued or something. And that has to be guarded against, especially these days. But this wasn't something somebody could sue about. They were just uncomfortable, didn't feel safe or something like that. But, when this happened 5 years ago, I talked with Ed pretty soon after it happened, and I advised him, go along with it. Do what they say. Don't teach there. I said, you don't need to. You don't need it. Move into new territory right now. It's sort of a hostile environment for you. If the people who run it are that sensitive and, they've got their problems they're dealing with, just go along with it because it's a whole new world waiting for you. Anyway, that was my attitude toward it. And one other thing, there is a page on Cuke.com, Cuke.com, just for this subject. If you go to the Ed Brown main page, just write Ed Brown in the site search box, and there's a link to it from there. I'm looking at that page now on Cuke.com, and the whole lecture is there. It's under Green Gulch Farm, July 18th, 2018, Edward Brown one-day sitting. So that was 6 years ago. The troubling excerpt number 1 is from the second tape, which is in the orientation he gave after the first sitting in Keeney. And the troubling excerpt number 2, and number 1, it's about bathrooms. And number 2, the second troubling excerpt is from an informal talk outside in the former pool area. It was about Zendo attire.
I also like to let you know, in case you haven't been here to Green Gulch, where the bathrooms are. Excuse me, I've gotten older and I need them more often. So, right over here on this side of the building, there's a building going up perpendicular to Stillwater Hall, and on the side of that building, there's a restroom, which I think is for both sex. And then over on this building that goes out perpendicular on the other side, on the far side of that building, there's a men's room and a women's room. And I don't know that we're particular about who uses which. I think you get to decide for yourself which I don't know about all that stuff anymore. Can't keep up. You figure it out. Byron Katie tells a funny story about how she was in the, she went into the women's room and, Byron Katie, loving what is. Judge your neighbor, write it down, ask 4 questions, turn it around. Amazing work that she does, which she calls the work. And she tells a story about going into a women's room, and she goes into the stall, and the toilet seat is all wet. And she thinks, what's going on here? Was the person in here before me a transvestite and standing on the toilet seat and peeing all over it? I mean, what happened here? This is outrageous. And then she does her work, and she's like okay with that, and she cleans it off, and she uses the toilet, and then when she flushes it, the water sprays all over. So much for what you think. And coincidentally, we're both working with a group called One Taste. Do you know One Taste? They practice oming. OM for orgasmic meditation. Oming. Jack and I don't, as far as I know, Jack doesn't practice it with them. I don't practice that with them. I teach meditation and outdoor walking and Qigong and he works with them on the phone mostly, but occasionally does retreats with them. So we may collaborate and do a retreat together with the One Taste people. They've come here 2 or 3 times, and they're much better than they were many years ago. You missed it. 10 years ago they were here, 30 of them. And in the dining room, at lunchtime, they were sitting in each other's laps. And at the very end of the day, I got up from my cushion, where I'm sitting, and there was a woman on the other side of the Zender there, and she was bending over to straighten her cushion like I talked to you about this morning. And as far as I could tell, she didn't have anything on but black panties. And I thought, well, it's embarrassing, you don't want to keep looking at something like this. And I forgot that I'm the teacher and I probably should say something about wearing clothes in the meditation hall. You forget, like it's up to, I'm the authority here, I should say something, Little did I know. So I went back to straightening my cushion, and when I turned around, she had her clothes on. It worked out. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take a few minutes now to straighten my cushion. In the meantime, if you all could get dressed.
This has been a Cuke audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Archives and Cuke Audio, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Dog and Bandita, Feline Manis, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.
Those who've been out walking, Ann here is going to hit a bell outside to signal you to come back in. And then those of you who've been at instruction, go out and walk. And after that, we have a period of Qigong. And then we have a period of sitting. And then it's lunchtime. And before you know it, if you're anything like me, it's 50 years later. What happened? Wow.